Welcome to DABCC Radio,
where smart people listen.
Virtualization and Cloud Talk,
Featuring cutting-edge solutions from the hottest companies around the globe.
broadcasting from the DABCC offices in sunny Sarasota, Florida.
Surrounded by computers, books, and Legos.
A Microsoft MVP, Citrix Charter CTP, VMware vExpert.
And your host, Douglas Brown.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of DABCC Radio. My name is Doug Brown, and I am your host for today, and we have a great show for you today. We have EG Innovations on the line with Citrix Ready, and we're going to talk about this migration from what's going to be end of life to here very soon, Citrix XenApp 6.5, and moving on into the 7.x world. So, and Bala and Sashi is going to talk about Bala from EG Innovations, and Sashi from Citrix Ready is going to talk about some strategies around this. I'm going to try to add a little bit, but I don't know. I'll do my best and share with you the challenges you guys are facing, and yeah, it's going to be a fun podcast. So with no further ado, let's just dive into it. Sound good, guys? Okay, here we go. Okay, guys, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the podcast show. I look forward to this. We have a very interesting agenda today, conversation, as I like to call it. So let's get right to it. As always, my first question is, who are you? So people know who they're talking to or listening to, I guess, and who I'm talking to. So let's take Bala first. Bala, who are you, and what do you do over at EG Innovations?
Hey, Doug. Thanks for doing this with us. This is Bala Vaidhinathan. I'm CTO with EG Innovations. In addition to running product engineering, I also run customer engineering for North Americas.
Sashi, we have you from Citrix Ready. So can you tell us who are you and what do you do with the folks at Citrix Ready?
Yeah. Hey, Doug. Hey, Bala. Nice to join you guys. Yeah. So I'm a technical marketing lead in Citrix Ready program, wherein we verify all the third-party partner products to ensure that they work with Citrix products. And once these products are verified as Citrix Ready, we then list them on our catalog called Citrix Ready Marketplace. So I'm basically more into a technical side.
Perfect. Well, today we're going to have a technical conversation around migrating, updating Citrix XenApp. So sounds like a very good agenda. And so let's get to it. So Sashi, 6.5, XenApp 6.5 is reaching EOL soon. When is that date exactly?
So we had released 6.5 back in June 2011. And it's been, I think, the most successful product what we have in the XenApp versions. And it is close to reach EOL by mid next year. That is approximately like June 2018. And along with this, we have few other products, few other XenApp versions also reaching EOL. That is the XenDesktop 7.0 till 7.13 versions. So ideally, the end of life is mid 2018.
So mid 2018. That sounds like a long time, but if you really think about it, it's only 6, 7, 8 months. And if you have not started, this is now the time to start, because you have to plan, you have to test, you have to deploy, you have to test, and then you have to roll out and then address any issues. So let's talk about the licensing models. Are there any difference in the licensing model between 6.5 and in the later version 7.5, 7.x?
So the Citrix licenses for the Citrix products, these are not very version specific, but these are tied to a date-based system. So when you are purchasing a new Citrix product, you purchase includes a 1-year membership in the Citrix Subscription Advantage program. So this Subscription Advantage program, it entitles you to for any product updates, including any major and minor releases. So, for example, if you take an example, if you are buying a XenApp product, maybe on today, October 16, 2017, you are entitled to do any updates released till next year, that is till October 15th, 2018. So all that you need to do with the migration is generate new licenses and then upgrade your licenses, and that should work absolutely fine.
Of course, 6.5 is EOL. I mean, that's a pretty hard stop date. We start losing support. It's one of those, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And a lot of people out there have 6.5 deployed. They're happy with it. It works for them. That being said, the big question is, why would we ever want to upgrade? Is it required? What are some of the features? It's a really good question. So what do you guys are hearing? What do you know about that? Well, what's your view on why they should, beyond just of course, it's EOL?
Yeah, that's actually an interesting question, and a dilemma that's facing a lot of companies today. It's a serious decision that they have to make. And Shashi touched a little bit on the end of license. So it's not only the end of life for Citrix XenApp that's coming up next year. The XenApp is running on Windows 2008, and that is getting long in the tooth too. So you're essentially looking at significant risk in terms of running on software that is not supported by the companies who were behind the software. So that's one obvious reason for large enterprise customers. That should be a no-no. Let's talk about new stuff that's coming out in XenApp 7.x, right? Display protocol upgrades, we know about that. App and image management for all XenApp editions now, optimized user experience, improved logon durations, improved. You actually get a lot more detailed breakdown and visibility into logon and user experience that helps you identify and resolve those issues. Cloud adoption, right? XenApp 7.x gives you the ability to go hybrid. You can have some of it in-house, some of it on your Azure and AWS. You've got Citrix Cloud that you can leverage, and you're consolidating XenApp and XenDesktop. There are multiple expanded use cases where you can deliver a more richer experience to your user base, more secure. Last but not least, compared to the older platform, while that is still working well for a lot of people, but compared to the older platform that is coming up to end of license, you are getting a much more secure and more manageable and current platform with a lot of other additional functionalities. But the key driver there would be taking care of end-of-life software, making sure you're taking advantage of the newer and more exciting technologies from Citrix, delivering better user experience in a more secure manner.
I agree with Bala. The points that Bala touched based on, many of them are like new features. There are a lot of enhancements that have been done to XenApp 6.5 and the later versions. So be it a security, or be it is the integration with the cloud side, and be it having the combination of XenApp and XenDesktop in single version. So these are all the benefits that one would get by upgrading or migrating it to the latest versions.
Yeah, I love the features and the benefits and everything you guys talked about. I agree with everything, right? And at the end of the day, we're talking 2011 through 2017. Things have changed a lot. And there's a lot of enhancements that are just, core feature, function, usability improvements that Citrix has added over the years. The problem was, of course, 6.5 is a great release. It's really solid. It works. And if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So I have to ask, why are people hesitant to do this? What's the big problem here?
Right, that's a big question, right? There are many, many reasons for this, and we find a varied variety of reasons when we interact with customers. Let's start with the most obvious of it, and this is a migration. It's not an upgrade. It is an important distinction, because you're not just running a piece of software on top of existing software and then bingo, you get the new version. This is This involves a lot of planning. This is a rip and replace, hopefully the last of this kind that we would do in our space. It can be streamlined, it can be made easy and straightforward, but the fact remains that this is a migration. And people know that these are not small projects, right? FMA is quite different from IMA, and this requires an amount of planning and designing and changes in the workflow within an organization that requires resources and time. If you have a lot of applications and you have a large environment, a lot of users, this could be challenging. This is a task. This is a project. Some organizations cannot take this on without some help from outside help, some consulting help or some, whatever the case might be. They need help to cross that bridge. Now that's out of the way. That's one of the big reasons that we see that people are hesitant to take that big step because it is a big step. But some of the more intrinsic reasons and things that you would not think are very important are, for a lot of customers, it works. It's a fantastic platform. 6.5, like Sashi mentioned, is one of the most successful Citrix platforms. So they're happy. It works. And why would I want to change it? Why would they want to change it? They don't want to change it because it works for their needs. It works for them. They have spent we've had a lot of customers telling us, hey, I've spent a lot of time perfecting it, and it's exactly the way I want it now. Introducing a change will create unpredictability, will create chaos. My users are happy, and frankly, they don't want to mess it up. So those are some of the non-technical reasons, if you will. But this is, I would say, these are the core reasons why customers are still in 6.5. Some customers are still hanging on to the platform. The fact that it is very successful, so people are quite happy with it. The environments are tuned fine, and then moving to the newer platform, while it has a lot of benefits, it also is a challenging migration with a lot of potential pitfalls if we don't do it right.
I love it. You're right, Bala. It is a challenging migration. I think that is, any time that you just throw work at somebody, they're going to say, I don't know if I want to do this right now. They're going to put it off. But like I said, there's just and like you guys mentioned, there's so many great benefits to the later versions. So, Sashi, what are you hearing from the Citrix side? I mean, what's Citrix doing to try to overcome some of these hurdles of, just apprehension of deploying or migrating to the latest versions?
Yep. So on the same lines, like people are hesitant saying that, okay, any new change, they would be a bit hesitant to do that. And this is, as Bala mentioned, this is not a upgradation what we're doing. This is completely like migrating from one platform or one complete product version to the newer one. Right. So it definitely needs some effort in the initial phases, but once you do that, I would say it is very beneficial for everybody. It gives a lot more features, a lot more administrative capacity as well. So that is definitely beneficial for the end user and for the administrator as well.
So is this one of those we need to start migrating now, or what do you tell your customers? I mean, I've always been a guy, well, unfortunately, I've always been a guy that tends to wait a little bit too late, aren't we all? But when it comes down to something like this, doing it in advance is always, in my recommendation, the best thing you can do, because you run into so many unknowns. And when you run into so many unknowns, well, you need time for that at the end of the day. So a little bit of planning goes along, or a lot of planning goes a long ways. And well, what do you guys think? Why is it now the time to start the migration? Or do we still have a little bit of time to sit back and wait and maybe see what happens?
We tell our customers to migrate now. This is the time. You've got a few months still of the support on the older version, and this is not a migration that will take a week. This is a migration that's going to take some time, and you're better off migrating now because the end of life is coming next year, not just for Citrix, but also the Microsoft platforms. And
sure.
It could extend due to unnecessary risk from maintenance, functionality, and security. The last thing you want is to be on an end-of-life platform when you need to be worried about security concerns in today's world. Yeah. 7.x also, to keep in mind, if this was a question, should I migrate now? If this was a question 3 years ago, that's a valid question because that was a relatively new platform at that time. But now, with a few years under the belt, 7.x has proven to be a stable platform, successful platform, and a secure platform. So it's at this point, there is no point in waiting any further. Like Sashi mentioned, it delivers richer functionality, more flexibility, and security to you. The longer you wait, the more time pressure you will be. And we will talk about the migration methodologies, and you will see why you still need support on 6.5 when you're migrating into 7.x. So the longer you wait, the more complicated it becomes for you. So we would recommend customers to start migrating now.
Most of our customers, they'll be using the XenApp 6.5 in the production environments, right? So if you wait until the product reaches EOL, and if you're not migrating, then the production may go down after the product reaches EOL. So it's better to do the upgradation at the beginning itself because there are several phases to do it. You may have to do some QA, and then you may have to do some analysis, and later on, then you will be taking it onto the production. So it could take some more time.
Absolutely. I built a career on migrating. I started off migrating from Novell to NT. And migrations are not, as you mentioned, Bala, are not upgrades. And there's a process that goes into place there. And so you have to plan for that. You have to execute. You have to test it, and then you have to roll it out. And that's a project. It's not an afternoon, right? And it's definitely different. So that being said, let's talk about some migration strategies. So can you share with us, the different migration strategies there are for moving from 6.5 to 7.x?
Yeah, the best migration strategy, there are a few out there, but I'll talk about the best that I've seen that work the best for our customers. I would call this parallel and phased migration. Essentially, you have to do it in parallel with 6.5 and in a phased manner. So this is, in a nutshell, this is how it works, right? You design, you plan, you do all of that, and you upgrade to storefront. Configure a storefront environment parallel to the web interface one, so you've got 7.x and 6.5 running. So 6.5 running, everything in production, and now you've got a small parallel 7.x environment. You can use a pilot deployment group to get some users on the new environment and make sure that you are ironing the kinks out, you're making sure everybody's happy, and once that group is happy, you make that group bigger and bigger. So you are running this parallel. There will be a point in time where you're running both 6.5 and 7.x in parallel for probably a longer duration before you complete the entire migration. So at the end, you complete the migration where you sunset your 6.5 and move into 7.x. But the key elements of this migration strategy is it has to happen in parallel with 6.5. You're not shutting down 6.5 and bringing up a brand new 7.x environment and cutting over all the users overnight. That is an approach that works in a lot of situations. This is not one of those situations. In this situation, we have seen the parallel approach work best. And the second thing we would also say is since there is a significant amount of changes in architecture and different elements and different types of applications and components coming in, and you have to understand how your application is going to work in this new environment and how it behaves in these different contexts, we would also recommend you do this in a phased manner. Don't just blow it out on a large number of users, but have it exposed to a smaller subset of users and making sure that you are testing it, you are clearing out all the kinks, you're making sure you're measuring it, you're making sure everything is good there. Then you expand that cycle in a phased manner. and then eventually you go into the new environment.
Well, I could not agree with you more. I love parallel migrations. They give you flexibility. If you have issues, you can always fall back. It just makes a lot of sense. So I agree with everything you said, 100%. Sashi, anything to add there?
So that's how I think usually the migration is designed, wherein you first put it in a lab environment, maybe for a smaller setup, so that you test it thoroughly. Once you're through with that, then you will take it to the production. And then before taking it to the production, you have several phases as well. You do the testing. There will be a lot of application testing, or probably the desktop testing. So these all phases would be included in that. And once you are thorough with that, then I think, as Bala mentioned, it is very convenient to move in a phased manner rather than moving it all at once. And that will give an ease to the customers as well.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of the parallel migration. It allows you flexibility in case of disaster, or case of the unknown. And any time you do anything, there's always unknowns, right? No matter how good you plan, you're going to run into unknowns. And the parallel migration sort of strategy, no matter almost what software you're migrating, if there's any complexity to it, and usually there are, then it's usually the one that allows you the most flexibility and ability to recover from the unknown, as I like to say. But of course, you always run into issues. You always run into more unknowns. And what are you guys seeing? What are you seeing around issues or problems or any major gotchas? You guys have any experience or feedback from your customers relating to things like that?
So as you mentioned, the parallel migration is one of the keys. It accounts for the unknowns, if you will, as you were saying. So I think what we want to talk about here is you will find a step-by-step on how to migrate guide from Citrix, right? It will go through all the different steps, all the different planning, which component to install first, and how do you expand from there and all of that. But I want to take a bigger picture view here and talk about one aspect that people miss a lot, and that leads to a lot of complications when it comes to migration. So what would be the key to a successful migration? The key elements for a successful migration from a big picture standpoint would be the following. The first one would be baselining. A lot of people miss this aspect of upgrade. So baselining the current environment that you're in, the current 6.5 environment. So what is baselining? Baselining is really understanding the behavior of your current environment from the user perspective, from application usage perspective. So basically, how many users are getting connected? What is their typical user experience? What type of applications do they use? How long do they stick in the systems? What is their activity level? What are the types of applications they use? What kind of resources those applications consume? Which are the popular applications you have? What time do you have the maximum amount of load in your environment? What are the resource consumption levels for that load in your environment? This is an understanding of your environment that you need to be aware of, not just analysis to say, hey, will this application that is working in 6.5, will it work on 7.x? That is important too. That is compatibility. But also understanding the baseline of the environment. How are the users consuming the current 6.5 environment? What is their user experience? What kind of resource consumption do you have to deliver that user experience, deliver those services? Understanding that is a key element to successful migration. That's number one. Number two will be performance management. Most customers we've worked with who've had successful migration have been customers who understood the value of performance management during operations, regular operations, but more importantly during migrations, where it gives you the visibility that you need to track, test, and measure success at every phase of migration, which is critical. You need to have performance management to understand how your environment is functioning in every different phase of migration. So you need to have baselining, you need to have performance management. A couple of other things would be to have visibility across end-to-end services in this performance management. Why is visibility across end-to-end as a service critical? Because Citrix is a platform. It's not just XenApp servers anymore. If you don't understand the entire platform, if you don't see a storefront, if if you don't see your NetScaler, if you don't see your SQL Server, which is a lot more important component in 7.x than it was in 6.5. If you don't see all these elements end-to-end, you are missing out on potential bottlenecks. You're missing out on potential issues that are going to have user impacts. You're missing out on potential issues that could create chaos during migration. So having visibility across end-to-end service helps you migrate much more faster and in a less troublesome manner. And not just visibility across end-to-end, but understanding Citrix 6.5 and 7.x as services, making sure that you understand these services are being delivered to the end user, being able to map them as service, having the right performance management solution to understand that view and make sure as 7.x keeps getting bigger and bigger when you do the migration, you need to be able to see how that service is being consumed, and you need to be able to compare it to the 6.5 baseline and see how you've done in the new environment. So I would say from a big picture standpoint, baselining your current environment so you can understand when you go to the new environment, do the baseline there and understand how things have changed. Doing performance management in the initial stages, not after when you run into the problem, but from the initial stages, and visibility across the entire service end to end.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, Bala, like the Citrix documentation is also crisp, which will help the administrators to perform this task easily. Like there are multiple documents, and for each product, the documentation is also so clear that you just follow that, and then I mostly like you will not fall into get into the trouble.
Good points, guys. Well, what about pitfalls? What about challenges?
Yeah. So yes, you talked about unknowns, right? So when we are moving architecture from when you're moving into a completely different architecture, completely different types of systems, for the most part, if you follow documentation, everything should go according to the plan. But in real world, it rarely does, right? What we see with our customers is they constantly run into expansion bugs, what we call as things that work perfectly when you have it in a smaller environment, in a smaller subset of users. But once you expand that set of users, you suddenly start running into issues. Now, these are usually caused by resource bottlenecks. But if you don't understand what the bottleneck is, you're just blindly throwing hardware at a problem. You might be able to fix some of those at some level, but you've not really fixed the problem. You've just put a Band-Aid to it, and it might break somewhere down the line. So, and in some cases, those Band-Aids are never enough because unless you get to the bottom of the bottleneck issue, you will never be able to get out of that. So that's where the migrations get stuck, where you're moving in the right path, you're doing everything right, but suddenly you've gotten into an unforeseen problem and you've gotten stuck there. So the key is to identify and resolve the bottleneck to take care of those expansion bugs. Performance management and total visibility is key here, so are the analytics. We've had customers who've had extremely successful migrations because they had the foresight to have the right performance management strategy before they started migration. So they knew that if they are flying blind without a performance management tool, if you walk into this migration path, you are flying blind. You don't have a dashboard to see how well you are doing, where the problems are, where the bottlenecks are. So when you have this strategy in place ahead of time, that's when we've seen migrations happen on time or even before time, under budget, successful migrations. Now we have other type of customers who also do this in the middle because somewhere down the line they ran into an issue and they realized, hey, I'm not able to see everything and I need to understand what is going on. We had a very good example of this a few weeks ago where we had a customer, a pretty large customer, who was moving into the new platform, latest version of 7.x, and they had transitioned about 25% of their user base, and suddenly they started experiencing significant slowdowns during a certain period of every day. During a certain time period, they started experiencing significant slowdowns, and they were sure that this had nothing to do with this had nothing to do with Citrix. So they looked at everything. They looked at Citrix. They looked at everything. They were able to try and figure out. They were trying to figure out what was going on there. Let's say between 9 to 11 in the morning or 8 to 10 during their peak hours for a couple of hours, everything would choke down to a crawl. And their initial suspicion was this was potentially an issue with logon, maybe multiple people logging on at the same time. But with the newer version of Citrix, you get much more clarity into logon, so you are able to see clearly what is going on with the logon. So we were actually working with them during that time, and they were able to see that Citrix was not an issue very clearly. And still the slowdowns were consistently happening. So we expanded the footprint of performance management across a larger spectrum of their environment, and what we found out was there was a firewall rule in between the storage devices and the profile management servers. The new storage devices, new profile management servers, all of this stuff that has come in for 7.x, all brand new stuff, high capacity. There was an old firewall rule that was stuck in there that was reducing the bandwidth of that pipe during that 2-hour period. This was just network configuration. It was a simple network configuration, and we were able to clearly see it, that this was a problem. Without getting that visibility, the customer was basically struggling for a week trying to figure out where the problem is, and they established that there was no problem here, but the problem was, once you expanded, you were able to clearly see the problem. But the long story short, the moral of the story is you have the right performance visibility across end-to-end service. You will be able to identify, isolate the problems, and move on. You will have, like you mentioned, Doug, you will have unforeseen issues come up. That rule was in place for some reason on a different network, in a different network on a different router or different firewall. When they copied it over, the guy copied over some of those rules. In addition to the basic rules that were supposed to be there, they also copied over some rule that was not supposed to be there. But lo and behold, nobody understood it or nobody knew about it until we were able to point it out.
So that's how usually it happens. Like whenever there is any change you are doing, obviously the first you'll think, okay, the new change is the culprit for this slowness or whatever the issue is. So good that you were able to trace it down, and then the problem was something.
Yeah, and they didn't see this problem when they had a couple of hundred users. When for that site, when they expanded from a couple of hundred users to 2,000 users, that's when they saw the bottleneck. Before that, there was enough capacity for everything to go through, even with that rule in. But once you expanded the users 10 times, you had the bottleneck, and EG wasn't monitoring those areas, so we didn't have any visibility into that, but we were able to clearly see that the network was slowing down into a crawl. But anyway, another common pitfall during migration is user experience issues, right? You get better visibility into user experience with 7.x. I mean, that's another reason why you should be looking at 7.x, because you can manage the user experience better because you get better visibility. You know why there is a potential problem, or you can see how you can improve the user experience. So user experience issues common quite often since there's a significant change in architecture and different elements are involved. It's tricky to diagnose without the right tools. From our perspective, we provide everything in a single dashboard, so it's easy for you to see end-to-end. It's easy to do.
Hey, Bala, what about seeing the experience after the fact. So we migrated, or we're in the process of migration. The half the rollouts there. How are we able to see if the performance is improved after the migration?
You spent a lot of money, right, and time migrating from an older platform to a newer, brand new platform. So did it help? That's a question that the audience who's listening to this podcast wants to answer, and the management wants to know. Before you start the migration, you want to establish success criteria for the migration. For most customers, it's some form of the following: improving the user experience, reducing the cost to deliver services, improve functionality and services delivered. So can I provide better functionality? Can I improve the user experience? Can I reduce the cost to deliver the services that I was delivering? So what is key here is having a baseline. If you did the right baseline before you started migration in your 6.5 environment, you would have all the metrics to compare those baselines into the newer environment and say, yes, the user experience has improved. Or if the user experience hasn't improved, you'll be able to dig into it and say, why hasn't it improved? Because if you go from better user experience to worse user experience, that's not how you want your migration to end up. You need to have at least the same user experience while having other benefits, or you have to have better user experience. So having the baseline helps you track that. So at the end of the day, you can have a report that says, hey, 6 months ago, complete 6.5 environment, this is where my user experience was, this is my overall resource consumption or cost to deliver the services, and these are the services I was delivering. And then 6 months down the line, we've moved completely into 7.16 or whatever the latest is. And this is my baseline today. This is my user experience. It's improved from X to Y. The reduced, we now deliver the same amount of services during load with reduced infrastructure consumption, and we are providing these additional services to the end user that we weren't able to deliver before. So being able to establish that shows you will be able to clearly demonstrate if you've improved after migration. And in cases where you haven't, you will have the data to go in and make sure that whatever the challenge is, you're addressing it, so you can come out on the other end on a positive note.
I could not agree with you more. I mean, it all comes down to data, right? The more data you have, that's what's going on in this whole big data or AI revolution, which is really just predictive analytics, right? We have the data, we can understand what's going on, our computers are fast enough, and then we can take action upon that. And it just makes all the sense. So I couldn't agree with you more. But that being said, there's probably a lot of common mistakes that people run into. So maybe you can share some of the common mistakes you guys have experienced.
So during migration, the most common mistakes that people do is something that I've been talking about quite a lot in this podcast, which is baselining. People starting their, they do an analysis of their environment, they do application analysis, but they don't do baselining. They don't understand the usage patterns. They don't understand the user experience. They don't understand the resource consumption. So if you walk into your upgrade without doing baselining, you don't know where you're starting. So every problem you encounter is a completely new problem, and you don't have a reference to compare it to. So you don't know if you're going in the right direction or not. So that's the most common mistake we see. Not having performance management in place. So a lot of people run into a bunch of problems in migration and things start getting ugly, and then they talk about, oh, if I had a monitoring tool, things would have been better. What should I do? But at that point, you've spun a lot of cycles that you need not have if you had the right performance management platform in place. Other issues that we see often are lack of adequate planning, underestimating the planning aspects of it. Trust me when I say this requires a lot of planning. You have to understand your overall profile of your environment. Make sure that you can, you can do the app compatibility testing. You can make sure everything is rolled out in a phased manner and you plan for all of this. You have to see the end state, how the end state is going to be delivered, how much XenDesktop, how much XenApp, and account for all the different things. Proper planning is critical here. So those are some of the common mistakes I would see that we see. Again, a couple of other things I would throw in there is throwing hardware at issues where it'll work if you go from 20 users to 200 users, throwing hardware at an issue, 200 users to 2,000 users or larger, throwing hardware is not going to fix the issue. You've got to identify the bottleneck. You've got to identify the issue and fix it. And you have to have user experience management, of course. That goes without saying. That's the most important parameter of the kind of service you're delivering to your end user.
You do sort of sound like a broken record, but you're hitting the point pretty hard there, and it like I just said, it comes down to that information, and like you've said. So we need the baseline, and we need that information in order to understand what's going on, and then we can avoid any gotchas. Because if I would like to say there's things there's things you don't know, and then there's things you don't, or there's things you don't know. And the things I don't know is what really scares me. The things I know that I don't know, I can figure that out, right? So it comes down to having the information, as you so eloquently put, I guess. So anything else to add there, Sasha? Anything to add?
As we were talking, right, there are multiple phases that we need to first plan out before we do the migration. And as I was also stressing on the administration side, wherein you have to definitely plan and understand the infrastructure before we even think of migrating it. So unless you get to know who is using what and at what time the utilization is more, it is very hard to even plan out the migration. So I think the best part wherein you will avoid most of these situations, the awkward situations, is the proper planning. Once you have it, I think most of the migrations will be successful.
Okay, guys, we've hit that pretty hard. So, let's go ahead and wrap this thing up. But before we do that, I would like to add, if you have any advice, any keys to success that you might want to share. My key to success is to plan, is to understand what you want to do, to test it. Boy, the reason I'm sitting here is because I wrote a book about planning, right, on how to document Citrix in a project-oriented fashion, and that was all about planning. And I think that's what you guys have talked about this entire podcast is plan for it, understand it, and understand what's coming back to you. Understand what the user experience is, both from the metrics that you get and from going out and talking to people too. Metrics will tell you one thing, but go out and talk to the guys. I always like to say, find the user that's the most disgruntled and turn that user around. Because if you can turn the most disgruntled user around, then you got something, right? Because then the other people that are sort of sick of listening to that person complain, going, wow, John's not complaining, so things must be pretty great. So that's always been my best advice. But what about you guys? What would you like to share with our radio listeners?
Sure. I think the following would be keys to success when you look at migration. One is proper and adequate planning. The second one is have the right performance management platform in place before you think about migration, before you start your migration. That should be part of your planning. That should be part of your baselining. That's the first step. Baseline your current environment so you know the key parameters and you know how to plan and how to execute and how to compare the results. You need to get total visibility of your environment. Like I was talking about a few examples. If you're just looking at Citrix and Citrix servers alone, you're not getting the visibility you need to manage this environment and the migration successfully. And have end-to-end analytics, making sure that you understand how your migration is progressing from a service perspective and what you need to tweak to keep running it smoothly. So that would be our keys to a successful migration.
Sashi?
And from my side, Yeah. So I believe if we follow the documentation, which is pretty detailed, and along with that, you also understand the latest features that are built in the latest versions, and also check the compatibility of your products with these. That will also help you avoid these awkward situations.
Absolutely.
That's all. I think once you have the administration in place, and then you start working on it slowly, you will close up having these issues. So you should be having a smoother migration.
So, guys, thank you so much. Bala, I do want to ask one more question, and you've talked a lot about the proper monitoring. Can you talk a bit, real quick, about what EG does, EG Innovation brings to the table, and how that fits into it beyond just everything else you've talked about, right? Make sense?
Right. So we are a performance management platform. We've been a Citrix Premier partner since 2003, so we've worked with Citrix pretty closely. Citrix has been a wonderful partner. We worked with them even developing some of the monitoring methodologies and monitoring metrics and all that, and all their different platforms. We support everything that Citrix has, even the new stuff that they are going to release and all that good stuff. And our goal is to provide IT performance monitoring and service monitoring in such a way that you can enhance your service delivery to your end user, where this becomes a value add to the company rather than a cost center. All the IT services are delivering significant value to your customers, and we want to provide unparalleled visibility into those IT services with analytics, so you can proactively stay ahead of the problems, take care of the issues, and deliver optimal services for your end users.
Perfect. Guys, thank you so much. This has been very educational. I've loved it, and I agree with everything you have to say. And like I said, to me, it's about planning. And if you plan it and you have the right tools, then you'll reach a successful conclusion, and that's just all there is to it. So, guys, I'll go ahead and give you the last word if there's anything we've left out or anything you'd like to add. Well, Bala, and also at the same time, maybe you could tell us where we can go to learn more about EG Innovations and what you guys bring to the table with migrating Citrix, XenApp 6.5 to 7.x and anything else like that. And so I'll shut up and let you guys have the last word.
Sure. Thank you, Doug. And thanks, Shashi, for participating in this and providing your insights too. So you can go to www.eginnovations.com. Maybe we can provide a link towards the end of the podcast, wherever you're listening this from. So the thing that I wanted to sign off with is to say that the performance monitoring solution with the right planning is the right way to go about this migration effort. And if you've been thinking about this and you're worried about all the challenges and issues that you might have when you walk down this path, EG solutions, EG enterprise performance management solution will give you the right visibility you need and the right help you need to guide you through this migration process, to provide you the visibility and the analytics you need to make the right decisions. So your migration is consistent, you can see what is going on, and you can be successful and achieve all the goals you set out to achieve in your migration process. With that, I'll hand it over to Doug.
Perfect. Sashi, any last words?
Yep. Yeah, as Bala was mentioning, right, we do also enjoy the partnership with EG Innovations. We have been partners for a long time, and I think most of the products from EG Innovations are already Citrix Ready, and they're listed on Citrix Ready Marketplace as well. And for the ones who are listening to this podcast and who are planning for the migration, so as we say, planning is the major part of the migration, and I believe the EG Innovations products will always help you with these activities when you have to monitor your environments. And follow the documentation, follow the process. If you run into any issues, I am very sure you know whom to get in touch with so that you get your issues resolved. So happy migration.
Happy migration. That's a perfect way to end the podcast. So happy migration. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Doug. Thanks, Bala.
Okay, that concludes another successful episode of DABCC Radio. As always, I want to thank my guests today, EG Innovations, Bala, and of course Citrix Ready, Sashi, for taking the time to be with us and talk about the challenge of migration. There's a lot to it, and I love the idea of everything that Bala's talked about. It's all about understanding your data and collecting data and then understanding it and then taking action upon it. And then Sashi, made some great points. One of the big ones is, to me, is there's some great guides out there. So follow those guides, and if you follow the guides, you get the data, you understand the data, you communicate with your end users. I think you can have a successful migration, and I think we have to do it whether we like it or not. So, and there's some great benefits of the latest versions of the newer versions, the latest versions of the Citrix suite. So, on that note, what else do I say? But thank you guys so much for listening to DABCC Radio. If you like the episode, please tell a friend. If you don't like the episode, please tell me. And definitely check out what these guys are doing. So head on over to their websites and eginnovations.com and, of course, citrix.com. And what else do I say except for check out www.dabcc.com for the latest and greatest cloud and virtualization and desktop and AI and IoT and storage and security, you name it. All of IT news is up there. So we're posting a lot of stuff each day, and it gives you a great place to find what's going on within the industry in one stop. So what else do I say? But thank you so much for listening to DABCC.
Can you say DABCC?
DABC.
Say it again, DABCC.
DABC.
Can you say it again, DABCC?
DABC.
How about DABCC?
DABC.
DABCC.
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 DABCC.